All right, time for another chapter from the Christmas 2012 book for bed. All right, so this one is called Rosebud and the Sled Hill. And there's Rosebud and some of her kids. I don't think we kept those for very long because I can't remember their names at all. There's Rosebud. She just really, it was amazing how far she would twist her head back. She just liked to stretch like that. And she did like to have her picture taken. Or she thought it was fun. She was huge too. That's an unusually large goat. Oh, now I look at this picture more carefully. I am actually standing right here, so my head is here, and her nose is all the way up to my eyebrow with her stretching her head up like this. And so her back is to like my waist. She was a pretty freaking big goat. And that's a bronco back there also for scale. It was, I don't know, it was a ways away, but anyway. Rosebud. Oh, this is about her dying. Okay, there's other books where Rosebud's alive. Rosebud died peacefully, but Mom and I cried and cried when it happened. She simply fell asleep one night and never woke up. I remember going into her shed in the morning to check on her because she hadn't come out for breakfast. She had her neck bent and her head resting on her shoulder, just like she always slept. I knew she was gone because I could see where her breath had frozen on her fur. This story, for some reason, still gets me. Dang. The worst part was since she was lying down when she died. She was so wide, we couldn't get her out through the door of the shed. It was the middle of winter, and the shed was partly buried in the snow. We had to leave her there until the snow melted enough to move the shed. Luckily, it was cold enough that her body was frozen solid, so it wasn't as gross as it sounds. Still pretty gross. Oh, I was so sad. Her breath was frozen on her fur. I could just, yeah. Oh, Rosebud. The summer before, we had created a sled hill. We used an old ice racing car in the center and piled dirt around it. There was a conveniently large space created by the roll cage inside the car, so when spring came, we opened a hole in the hill and pushed her body into the car and filled it with more dirt. Honestly, I think we had to actually completely dismantle the shed to get her out. We had to as soon as the shed was no longer frozen in the top few inches of ground, we hefted it up out of the frozen ground and just pulled it off over her. Okay, so we pushed her body in the car and filled it with more dirt. That was much easier than trying to dig a hole big enough for her body in the still frozen ground. Throughout the spring and summer, we kept trying to fill in the empty spaces around the car. So we would stuff yard debris, bushes that had been pulled out of the ground, and sometimes the hot ashes out of the stove into the empty areas. Unfortunately, the hot ashes caught some of the yard debris on fire. The stuff inside the hill and car burned and burned for quite a long time, perhaps even years, because there was so much peat in the dirt. Not surprisingly, it smelled like barbecue for at least a few weeks after the fire started. That actually was probably totally a blessing now that I think about it, because if this goat was huge, hundreds of pounds of goat meat had been rotting in that hill in the summertime, we would have been attracting all kinds of horrible animals. Not horrible animals, perfectly natural animals, but they would have been attracted to our place, which was not a good idea. So thank goodness for the fire. 25 years later, in September of 2012, our good friend Jeff cleared the land after some squatters had lived there and left all their junk lying around. Jeff didn't remember helping us build the hill up around the ice racing car with his tractor, or putting Rosebud's body inside of it. When he tried to level it, he discovered the bones inside the car. He didn't recognize them as goat bones, so he was understandably alarmed. He called Mom and carefully asked her what they were. I'm sure he was very relieved when she reminded him about Rosebud. Okay, so here's the weird thing. So, not a few years ago, my brother Kelly tells me that cops showed up to his place in Chicago, that's where he was living at the time, and asked him a bunch of questions because no one stopped to like look and make sure that they weren't human bones. There was an assumption made that these were human bones. They were not. They were clearly goat. And so I don't know why I didn't include that story in the book, or maybe I didn't know that. I don't know. But then when we had to sell the property a few years ago, the people who were buying it had heard rumors that there were frightening things buried on the property. And like, hey, you know what? I know what you're thinking of. I promise. It was a misunderstanding. It was just goat bones. Everything was on the up and up. I just think the rumor went around that human remains were found, and the rumor never made it back around that it was discovered to not be human remains. So everything's A-okay.